Good morning and welcome to Indonesia Today. I'm Jason Teja Sukmana in Jakarta. In today's headlines, clashes break out between security forces and thousands of students trying to reach the parliament building. Dozens of students and soldiers are hospitalized after troops open fire with rubber bullets and tear gas. And opposition leaders are expected to meet with parliamentary delegates to reach some form of national reconciliation. Violent clashes between students and security forces mar the third day of the People's Consultative Assembly special session, leaving dozens from both sides injured. A tight security cordon remains in place around the Parliament building as the capital braces for more student rallies on the final day of this final session.
Violence broke out in Jakarta streets as around 100,000 students trying to reach the Parliament building clashed with security forces last night. Clashes occurred in several points near the parliament as riot police fired rubber bullets and tear gas to disperse the students. The clashes were a build-up of days of tension as students heightened up their resistance against the special sessions of the People's Consultative Assembly, which convenes to lay a new political grounds for Indonesia's future. Earlier in the afternoon, the situation around the Parliament building where the session is being held was normal, with all roads approaching the area completely blocked off by security officials to anticipate possible disruptions. And sure enough, not long after, groups of students made their way to the building, still demanding for the assembly to evict the armed forces out of politics and prosecute former President Suharto for alleged corruption and violations of human rights. In early afternoon, security officers managed to contain most of the students, particularly around the Senen Commercial District, the Pancoran intersection, and Block M. But several hours later, over 100,000 students have moved their concentration to 3 spots not far from the parliament buildings, across the Jakarta Police Headquarters, under the Semanggi flyover on the east, and next to the Sleepy intersection in the west. Emotions were high when security forces blocked students from continuing their march. Intending to avoid confrontations, both sides tried to negotiate. But after several hours of talks failed, clashes unavoidably broke out. Security forces were forced to use tear gas and rank shots into the air while trying to push the students back. But when this failed, they charged into the line of protesters. More student rallies are expected today, particularly in the afternoon, leading to the closing of the MPR special session scheduled for this evening. This is the RCTI News team reporting.
Hundreds of injured were admitted to hospitals around Jakarta, including the Minto Harjo Navy Hospital, Pertamina Hospital, and St. Carolus Hospital. Most victims suffered broken bones after being beaten by security forces with batons. One of the victims, who has yet to be identified, was a high school student admitted to St. Carolus and Salemba Central Jakarta. 3 students from the Universities of Indonesia and Gunadarma suffered severe injuries after being hit by rubber bullets and tear gas canisters. The students have since retreated from the area around the Parliament building and are now taking shelter at Atmajaya University and several buildings around the Gatot Subroto area. Security forces have eased their presence at strategic points around the parliament, though only a few streets leading to the parliament building remain open. The withdrawal of the troops was held in stages, beginning with the crowd control troops from the Marines and the Army. Local security authorities have also withdrawn a handful of barricades blocking the streets into the parliament. Students after midnight were seen taking shelter at the Mulia Tower near the Semanggi Cloverleaf, while the military were singing songs as they piled onto trucks returning them to their barracks late last night. Meanwhile, calls are growing for the students and the military to avoid further clashes. A group of former Indonesian student presidents called on their friends to stage peaceful rallies in their push for greater democracy. A similar appeal was also made by the vice chairman of the Crescent and Star Party, Anwar Sanusi. He called on both parties to exercise restraint and respect each other's positions. Anwar says violence was not the way to bring about more freedom and democracy and would only lead to more casualties. Anas Alamudi, the University of Indonesia student who rammed into a barricade of security forces during a demonstration in central Jakarta Wednesday, says he panicked and lost control when the troops began smashing his car. Anas, currently in custody with a friend at the Jakarta Police Headquarters, was driving his VW Safari when security officers moved in to disperse protesting students. 9 soldiers were injured in the incident. Anas, after being examined by doctors for almost 21 hours, said he was trying to escape from the crowd and had no intention of injuring the officers. Meanwhile, his father, Abdul Alamudi, says the police have promised not to turn over his son to other security authorities. The law student now faces felony charges for injuring the soldiers and possibly attempted murder. Attempts to forge a national reconciliation between Indonesia's opposing political elite may finally produce results. The 4 opposition leaders that gave birth to the Ciganjur Declaration have agreed to meet with faction leaders of the People's Consultative Assembly today. Given the political considerations involved, however, some reservations have been voiced and could prevent the meeting from taking place.
The meeting on Tuesday of 4 prominent reforms leader, Abdurrahman Wahid, Amin Rais, Sultan Hamengkubuwono X, and Megawati Soekarno Putri, that gave birth to the Ciganjur Declaration, is regarded as a pivotal point in the ongoing political joust among Indonesia's elite. In a meeting yesterday with former student activist and economist Rizal Ramli, who has been lobbying for the meeting to take place, Abdurrahman Wahid conveyed the group's hope to meet with faction leaders of the MPR before the MPR special session ends today. Members of the MPR factions have generally given positive responses to the Ciganjur initiative in terms of its implication to helping bring peace and stability back to Indonesia's political system. But there are some reservations on various aspects of the meeting's substance, which will have serious political implications. Budi Harjono, chairman of the government-recognized Indonesian Democratic Party (PDI), believes the meeting would be mutually beneficial, as both sides could combine inputs on the state of the nation. Chairman of Golkar's MPR faction, Marzuki Darusman, substantially agrees with the initiative, but he diplomatically says the meeting does not have to take place before the MPR special session ends, which would mean that he and other faction chairmen would no longer be in their capacities as leaders of Indonesia's highest legislative body. The Armed Forces faction, on the other hand, has some reservations if the meeting turns out to be unconstitutional, saying the proposal should be seen in its proper context.
I do not agree if that statement must be seen as a replacement or substitute. The decision has to be made by these special sessions.
The United Development Party (PPP) is also cautious in assessing the matter, particularly its substance. As conveyed by Zarkasi, PPP will not concede to any proposals to gradually phase out the armed forces' place in the House of Representatives, as proposed by the Ciganjur Declaration. It wants the process to be immediate. Students who have been at the front line since day one in opposing the MPR special session have diverse comments on the reconciliation proposal. One student delegation of various universities in the Greater Jakarta area have given their support because the meeting could give birth to a true reconciliation of the nation's leaders. But another student delegation from the Jayabaya University is more careful in assessing what the meeting could mean towards attempts to alter the socio-political role of the armed forces. Abolishing this socio-political role has been the cornerstone of the student reforms movement, and some students regard the Ciganjur Declaration as a political compromise from the country's elite. It is still uncertain whether this historic meeting between the opposition leaders and assembly leaders will take place at all. As of last night, at least Amin Rais has confirmed that, God willing, the 4 Ciganjur declarees will go to the parliament building today. If this meeting does take place before the MPR special session ends, Indonesia will witness one of the greatest political feats achieved in this reforms era. This is the RCTI News Team reporting.
The United Development faction carried out its threat to walk out of a special session after hitting a political impasse. The faction walked out of the Commission A meeting last night during deliberations on a general election decree. Faction spokesman Alfian Darmawan told Commission Chairwoman Marwa Daud Ibrahim that a faction had to leave the room because it could not agree with the views of the other 4 factions on the gradual reduction of the military in the House. The faction's request to hold a secret ballot on the issue was rejected by the other factions. Alfian then left the room at around 2:30 in the morning, followed by all 27 faction members on the commission. Commission A is scheduled to continue deliberations today. Commissions B and D have completed discussions on 4 proposed decrees, which are expected to be passed unanimously today. Commission B discussed administrative procedures for the NPR, while Commission D discussed decrees on regional autonomy and better revenue sharing with the provinces. Commission D, in its discussion on wealth distribution, hit a snag on whether the word pribumi or indigenous should be used to define small and medium enterprises in the text. Commission C failed to reach consensus on the corruption, collusion, and nepotism decree, with the United Development faction calling for a special investigation into the wealth of former President Suharto. And lastly, Commission E, deliberating a human rights decree and the lifting of requirements for Pancasila courses, postponed discussions until today. 10,000 people gathered in a graveyard in Dili, East Timor to commemorate the anniversary of the 1991 Santa Cruz incident that left dozens dead. Yesterday's ceremony followed an early morning mass by Dili Bishop Carlos Bello. Bello and regional military chiefs called on the people to remain calm during the anniversary. This year's ceremony comes amid new efforts to secure a lasting peace for East Timor. As a final act of remembrance, the crowd reenacted the shooting incident, with dozens laying on the ground as if they had been hit by bullets from machine gun fire. And coming up next, Indonesia agrees with the International Monetary Fund to gradually reduce domestic interest rates. And Poland is optimistic that Indonesia will soon overcome its current economic crisis. We'll have the stories right after the break.
Boleh ceplas-ceplos asal jangan adu jotos. Bercerai kita engos, bersatu kita